Would you like me to kick things off?
Yeah, go for it,
Cool,
Louise.
awesome. Welcome everybody to the very first online All Collective, the African Women in Entertainment event. It has been a long time in planning, and I think it's going to be a fantastic conversation. What is the All Collective? It came about as a result of three women, two of whom, myself and Mimi Bartels and Tracy Ann Van Rooyen, all industry members, one night sitting over a very large cheese platter and wine, and kind of figuring out that our war stories weren't that different. What I mean by war stories, as a female entrepreneur, I've always found it a little bit lonely, particularly as I come from a background of sound engineering. I'm not a sound engineer, but I'm in the business of audio post-production. It's primarily male. And what I always found quite fascinating was how men treated me. And invariably, it was quite inappropriate. But so Mo Abadou always says, I'm nearly 60. So I can say I'm nearly 50. And in my nearly 50, I'm very used to patriarchy and chauvinism. So took most of it in my stride. But then came the day when a woman in business went really out of her way, not just to step on me, but to really kick me off my path for no good reason other than because that was just how she did business. And I was really intrigued by this, so much so that it led me to do some gender studies focusing on women in the workplace. And during that, I started to learn about, Queen Bee syndrome, Superwoman syndrome, the double bind. And I learned that it wasn't just me, but actually there are many women, in fact, all women in the workplace face the same challenges. And so then when Mimi and Tracy and I got together and we started to share these war stories, we realized that there was value in because we knew we were supporting each other, that there was value in setting up a platform for us to have these conversations and to find ways to support each other so that we can start to create inclusion and diversity from within. So kind of cheese and wine became a WhatsApp group where we started to just kind of celebrate our wins and ask questions and see how we could support each other. And then a little while after that, Martin approached my business partner Mbali Tibete and I and said, did we want to sponsor the Women in Entertainment breakfast at MIP Africa last year? We jumped at the chance, and that really materialized into what you see today. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us. Enjoy the conversation. The Superwoman syndrome is a real thing. I realized that when I learned, I would always say, I've overestimated my Superwoman powers today, when I really had literally run out of capacity and could not fit a single other thing into my day. So enjoy the conversation. I know that there is the how to join if you're not a member is going to be put up in the chat. And I'm now going to hand over to Kudi to facilitate this conversation. Yeah, please take it away. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Louise, for that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kudi. I'll be the moderator for the afternoon. And this is one of the first webinars for Fame Week ahead of the event later on this year. So just a reminder to pre-register because pre-registrations are open. And as Louise said, this is one of the first webinars for the All Collective. And it is a network of very powerful women, as you will see in the conversation that we will have today. So this webinar, which is Debunking the Superwoman Fallacy, is designed to give a candid and insightful discussion and exploration into the pressure points that women face as they strive to balance their professional life with their personal life. So just a few house rules in terms of the Q&A. There will be prompts in the chat, so please drop in your questions there. And also please keep your mics on mute. We'll open the floor later on. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our incredible panel for today. We have got Mimi Bartels, if you could just wave to everyone. She is the co-founder of Anakle Films and the creator of Netflix Black Book. This made it to #1 in South Korea for 2 weeks and charted in 69 countries. It was part of the top 3 Netflix Global for last year, and she was also named 2021's most bankable producer in Nigeria. That is a flex, you guys.
Wow.
two and wife of one. Welcome, Mimi. We
Wow.
have Kopano Cohen, who's an executive producer and content development specialist with over 17 years of experience in the industry in creative strategy and acquisition. She's worked in contract administration and international content acquisition at Mnet and has also held a lecturing tenure at AFTA. Welcome. We have Vivian Chuena. Please just say hi to everyone. She is the current content partnership manager at TikTok Africa. She's a seasoned brand strategist and partnership manager, and she's worked in all spheres of this entertainment industry for the past 14 years. You guys are in very good hands today. These are some heavyweights, essentially. Then we have Jamie Lee, who is from The Musicians. Thank you so much for joining us and balancing out this film team. She is an accomplished singer, musician, songwriter, and multifaceted artist. And then we have Antos Stella. She is CEO of Music Arena, which is the home of Gallo Record Company. And if you didn't know this, I didn't know this. This is one of the oldest record labels on the continent. And Antos has been in the music industry for over 40 years. And last but not least, we have Nicola Fannykerk, who is the head of premium content and co-productions at MultiChoice. As we all know, MultiChoice produces more than 6,500 hours of content on the African continent, of which Nicola's department is in charge of over 1,300 hours. 1,300 hours, guys, that's a lot. This is of English and Afrikaans content, as well as all the co-productions with international partners. Welcome to this team of exceptional women. All right, guys, so I'm just gonna launch straight into it because we've got an hour, but we've already spent 10 minutes, so let's get straight into it. The first question is, when we're discussing aspects of the Superwoman syndrome, how would you firstly, I think the first question is, how would you define what Superwoman syndrome is? And I'm gonna throw this question to Kopano. What have been your experiences with regards to this?
I think Superwoman syndrome is something that we all as women are kind of more prone to. And I think it's the idea that you can have it all. But what does it take to be able to get it all? I think as mothers, wives, we have all these roles in the domestic setting, and then we have these other roles outside in the industry. And our industry is extremely demanding. You know, there are people who get to turn off their laptops at 5 o'clock because they work in a bank, etc. We don't stop working. And I think it's the idea that in the pursuit of all of these things we want, you find yourself unbalanced, you find yourself flustered, and you find yourself having taken on too much. And this can either be a day-to-day occurrence where your schedule is fully booked from the moment you wake up till you go to sleep, but also it works in projects. If you've got 2 or 3 at the same time, it's the idea that you're trying to juggle so much because you think you're a superwoman. You've done it before, but ultimately, you know, to what end and is it really worth it? Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I suppose maybe it's a lot about perception. We can take on a lot more than we realize. But perhaps the question I want to ask, and Mimi, this is for you, is being a superwoman a little bit more about that? Is it also how you carry yourself? You've been in rooms with very powerful people. Is it about composure? What exactly for you does it entail?
So honestly, sir, can everybody hear me? Just checking
Yeah.
on Nigerian.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So honestly, until like, I never actually thought of like Superwoman syndrome before. I didn't even know that there was a term. Like that's how like deep into like my mess, you know, I had been. I didn't even know like that was a thing. I always kind of felt, and forgive me if I'm getting your question wrong, but I always kind of felt like my issue with being the woman in these rooms is I can't show emotions, which makes no sense because I am literally in the business of emotions. I have to compose myself. I have to laugh appropriately at some certain jokes. I have to know I have to be more prepared than everybody in the room. And then I'm 5'2". I don't wear makeup like that. I don't do my hair up the way, because I actually did get feedback once that like, oh, you're such a powerful woman. You should like, you know, wear like, you know, the wigs and wear heels and, you know, just, you know, look like a corporate. And I'm just like, I'm making like 1 billion a year for you guys. You still need me to like torture my heels, like torture my knees to be this person. So like when the question came up about like the Superwoman syndrome, I didn't know that that was a term. Like I walk into a room and I don't think like, oh, I am a woman. I just think I'm a person. But unfortunately, every room that you walk in, you have to be defined by something. I guess that's just human nature. For people to understand properly, you just need to put you in a box. And it just seemed easier to put me in the box as said woman who looks natural, and maybe she might have something to say. And then I realized that until like my voice is my weapon. Like it's once I speak that they're like, oh, okay, it seems like she knows what she's doing. But nobody has that impression once I walk into the room. I mean, that's it for me. I don't know if I answered the question, but that's been my life so
No,
far.
you did. Thanks so much for that, Mimi. And I suppose maybe part of the experience that you mentioned is very much in the film industry. So I'm going to throw this question to Antos and to Jamie Lee. Has been your experience within the music industry about being a superwoman? Is it a little bit like what Kopano mentioned, or a little bit like what Mimi mentioned? Is there this pressure for appearance or to perform?
Can I go, Antos? Do you mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think within the music industry, being a female in the music industry is very, very tricky, because you have two sides to it. You have to promote yourself in order to be booked, but you have to promote yourself. You have to decide early on in your career, what are you promoting? Because females in the industry have been notoriously sold as sex symbols, many of them. There is that kind of promotion. And then also everyone that you are promoting to, the festival owners and the promoters, are all male. So what I found is a lot of the time I decided earlier on that my voice and my talent is what I want to sell. And not saying that being sexy and owning your sex appeal as a woman is bad, not at all. But what I felt as a whole in the industry is that with the promoters and how they're pushing the agenda is often from a sexual angle. So for me, I decided early on that I want to promote my talent. I want to promote my voice. But what it did do is that it put me at a lot of walls. And for a long time, what promoters would say is that, yes, we can definitely have you on the lineup. We can definitely have you on the bill, but you're going to open the show. And I was the only woman until today. I'm the only female on lineups, at music festivals. It's a huge problem. But in saying that, with all of us talking, I feel that when we have these discussions, solutions are very, very important. So what I'm doing in the background is that I'm having these conversations with these promoters, and I'm having these conversations with festivals. Not saying that we are badly done for, but that we need to step up in terms of representation of women. So having that Superwoman fallacy, that everything can be done, that I need more work, this isn't good enough, I need to be on time, I need to represent myself in a certain way. Within the music industry, as a female artist, it's very, very tough, but I am trying to have those conversations with these people in hopes and in order for a little bit of change.
And Antos, from your perspective, just touching on what Jamie Lee Sexton said, this is on her personal capacity as a performer. What have you found as being on the other side, perhaps in the boardrooms of the music industry, part of the Superwoman fallacy within the music industry? Can you enlighten us on that?
So I think I'm going to just before I get to Jamie Lee, just go back to Mimi. Very similar to her. I jumped into the music industry as a young 24-year-old, starting up in what was the biggest label at the time, showing a lot of success. And I was so passionate about the music that I got lost in pushing the music and didn't look at what was happening around me because I was very much a junior. I think a couple of years later, I started realizing that the dynamics, and I mean, I'm talking the 80s at this time, and there were a lot of other historical factors around us in South Africa. But as I have come up, and I mean, you know, as I've worked my way up, and I'm with Vimy too, because I was like, okay, let me think about the Superwoman syndrome. I mean, you know, I've had a very, and I come back to, I think originally what Martin said too, it's been a lonely journey. And that loneliness in the journey has been very much about me talking more about the music. And Jamie, I'm very sad to hear that, and I acknowledge that still currently, which is one of my passions, is that women are still so badly treated in the music industry. From an artist perspective, we don't even have producers. We see success, but what women have had to sacrifice for that success, and that's a whole different discussion. But honestly and truly, I think it's a very lonely journey, and especially when you start getting into the ranks. There have been times where I have been in boardrooms that I've been so frustrated that I've cried, but I've owned that. I've owned that emotion, because it's always been, oh, is it that time of your month, or why are you getting so emotional? You know, it's like, so I've become very tough, and I raised a child on my own. I have, in hindsight, being at the age that I am in and the position that I'm in, I realize that the journey that I've taken, I do not want to see the young woman coming up in the industry have to sacrifice including my daughter, who's 28 years old, to have to sacrifice what I've had to sacrifice. In that journey, though, I didn't feel the sacrifice, but I have to tell you now, at this age, I do feel that I sacrificed a lot. I never got married. I sacrificed there were very few men who wanted to be involved, whether it was whatever my choice was, to be involved in someone who traveled a lot, that specifically traveled a lot with musicians. So you have both sides. So, I mean, it's only now that I can say in hindsight, I can only teach those that are coming up, be it an artist or those people. And there are very few women that are entering the music industry for a whole lot of reasons. I think Jamie's, kind of alluded to one or two of them. So it's been a lonely journey. If you talk about the Superwoman syndrome, for me, in hindsight, I can say it's been a lonely journey.
Thank you for that, Antos. And it's quite interesting to hear in terms of the personal sacrifice that you've mentioned that you've had to experience. I think that's something that all of the women on this panel, and even some of the people who are in the audience, can relate to. What I'd like to ask is, this is for Nicholas specifically and for Vivian. Can you also share additional personal moments, some anecdotes, as Antos had, in terms of what your experiences have been in terms of trying to live up to the Superwoman ideal, and what this has done to impact your personal lives?
I can start by saying I think I realized the madness of the Superwoman syndrome in 2018. I'd enrolled for my MBA because it was, at MultiChoice, you can only advance to certain levels with specific degrees. And I'd enrolled for my 24-month MBA on top of having a small child who was learning to read and write, on top of having a very busy and very important husband. And I realized I took no time off. I finished the degree in 20 months. I worked every night, even though having to study. I got it cum laude. I made myself so sick because I felt like I could not let any ball drop, because I felt like the minute you're out of the boardroom, you are going to miss out. And it's not the same as it is, I think, for men missing out. You miss opportunities. You're not part of a conversation. And I felt like I could not drop any ball. Like there was absolutely no grace for me to try and do any of this. And it was just, I mean, the fact that when I look at it now, and the fact that I got through it, and that's interesting because I think I did it to myself. I think, and I wasn't 40 yet, and I think post 40, I can look at it and go, that's ridiculous. Like Nicola, you were ridiculous. But there's also a little thing where I think that women honestly believe that there is less space in, less promotions, less big positions in C-suites or whatever for allocated to females, which means that we become incredibly ruthless about trying to get there. And then you see terrible, terrible, terrible narcissistic behavior from females in powerful positions. And then it means that we will step on people, and then we become quite paranoid about what people are doing. So we then start making decisions like we don't hire the right people in because we're worried that if we hire smarter than us, they'll replace us. And it's a really nasty cycle that we are actually creating because we can't be honest about what we face and our actual insecurities. I don't know if I answered your question. Sorry. There we go.
Answered it perfectly. I mean, the very notion of trying to balance being a mother and an MBA and a full-time job, that's kudos to you. I can't imagine how difficult that was. Vivian, I'm just going to throw the question to you, the same question, which is, can you give us a personal anecdote similar to what Nicola just shared, as to a moment you felt you had to balance your professional life with your personal life?
Thank you, Cody. I think I definitely do share the same sentiments around the room in terms of a lot of experiences that we go through as women. But I also had to kind of like take a step back and unpack what it actually means to have the Superwoman syndrome. Much like Mimi, I actually didn't know that it was a thing, that was a name on it. So for me, it had a lot to do with my career progression and how I then realized that in the rooms that I was placed in, I almost had to find myself, doing a little bit more than my male counterparts to either, get a promotion or get a certain title that I was gunning for or an account. I've also worked for quite a while in the music industry, and I also share the same experiences that Antos has had. Even with personal relationships, you almost have to take a step back and think about, okay, what does this mean, for my career and the progress thereof? Does my male counterpart stand a better chance of getting a certain campaign, position, whatever that looks like? But even in relationships, you're almost kind of like judged because you spend a lot of time around musicians who are mostly male. And so you almost feel the need to prove yourself a little bit more than other people that are around you. So it has, to be honest with everybody in the room, it has been a bit of a struggle for me as far as my career projection of the progress thereof is concerned, just because I've always had to work a little bit more harder, be a little louder with the things I do or say, command attention in ways that men wouldn't necessarily have to fight for that place. So that has been my experience personally. And yeah, I think the Superwoman syndrome is a thing that we can now, because we're having these conversations, we can be a lot more self-aware and know how to navigate, spaces a lot better. And also, I think, change the narrative for, the younger generations. So yeah, that is my story.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vivian. Okay, so I'm going to open the question rather to the floor. And I'm not sure if you're all aware, there's a TikTok thread going around where younger women ask older women for advice. And in as much as we're speaking about the challenges and the difficulties we've all faced, I think everyone here is a prime example of the fact that it is possible. We can do some of these things. So perhaps one of the things we can speak about now for the audience as well at home is, what are some of the tips and tricks and strategies that you guys have used to navigate these challenging demands? For example, let's start with motherhood. The question we all have is, how can you be an amazing mother and also someone who's kick-ass in the boardroom and kick-ass at their job? This is a question that is open to the floor.
I'm happy to start because my daughter is now 28. I think the most important thing is to create a village. I mean, I know it's cliched, but being a single mom, raising a young daughter, and being in the business. I mean, when she was 7 months old, I was already sent to Hong Kong, and it broke my heart. But I was in that position where I was now the sole provider, and it was the only business that I knew. And I asked my mother to come back and live with me. And I had an incredible, kind of very small circle of friends, some in the industry who understood. And I think that, if I look back and I hear my daughter talk now, the experiences that she had and she lived, she is in a very different place. She does not want to be an entrepreneur. She doesn't want to. She says, our lives are very different. And I respect that she wants balance in her life. But the only thing I can say is that, and I think we all realize that if we don't have a village around us, if we don't have the support, then it becomes incredibly difficult, because particularly in our industries, you have to do something at the drop of the hat, as we said, putting out fires, something unexpected, dealing with people that are also very creative and very emotional. You literally become the artist's lives as well. And so it's always being ready to have someone who can step in. And I guess that for me has been the biggest kind of probably the biggest thing that I have done. The biggest is to create this family around me.
Thank you for that, Antos. And let me expand on the question a little bit more. What would you tell the younger version of yourself with regards to balancing motherhood and your professional life? This is also open to everyone on the floor. Mimi, I think your hand was next.
Oh yeah. So I think once I realized, and I did research on this, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong. Once I realized that there's no award for being a super mom, I was like, screw it. Like, there's no. So I was like, why am I killing myself? I think that was like the one thing I had to accept. And there's something I tell my husband. I'm like, we all came to this life on our own. I'm gonna live my life. My son is gonna live his life. So I have those conversations with my son. He's 5, and he's like, oh, he wants to play now. I'm like, I promise you, mommy will get to you. But and I find that he's very supportive and understanding. Like, he would come back at that time that I said, blah blah blah. Once I figure that out, I tell my friends, like, there's no award for this thing. So like, what are you fighting towards? What are you working towards? Like, think of you. I've seen my mom say, I did this for you. And I was like, but you were unhappy in your marriage. You were unhappy in this, and you did this for me. Like, so how did that work out for you, mom? And she never has an answer. I ask her every year, she still doesn't have an answer for me. And then the other thing as well, and Kudi, I don't know if you remember this or not, but one of the times we first met, she asked me like, oh, what do I do? And then I responded, but I bent into the chair. I didn't say too much of what I did. I didn't own it. And then she said to me, like, why is it like women in power always like bend when you ask, like, what do you do? Like, why do you hide who you are? Like, this is your stuff, own it. So when you actually said, when you read my introduction and you said this is a big flex, I was like, I hope Kudi got that. Like, I learned from what she said, like, to own my power. So like, what I would tell my younger self is like, own your power, own your voice. There's nobody else that's going to speak for you except you. And there's no savior that is coming. There are people that help you along the path, but it's ultimately you. I'd make sure you surround yourself with women like Kudi and Louise that would constantly remind you that you're a queen. Anytime I say hi to somebody that I know is a woman, I always say, hi, queen. They probably don't get it, but I'm reinforcing that, like, you matter. Like, in a part of your world, you are a queen. Maybe you're not like Queen of England, but you're a queen. So that's what I would have told my younger self, because I bent too much. I folded a bit too much where I should have been louder. So I'm hoping now that women listening on this call, don't hide who you are, man. Just be loud and proud. That's me.
That's beautiful. Thanks so much, Mimi, for that. Anyone else on the floor giving advice to a younger version of themselves and how to balance it all? Vivian?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Who is that? Kupano? Is that you?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Mimi, I really resonate with what you said about just be loud and be proud and be yourself. But I mean, when we were all starting out in the industry, there were all these expectations of what's appropriate and what's not that I think have kind of moved away now in our industry. We're more authentic and open with each other. But I just want to say, Nicola was talking about doing her MBA. So I'm in the middle of my postgrad in business. I've got a 14-year-old daughter and a full-time job. And it was one of those options of you could do it in a year. And I remember 18 months ago looking at this and going, I'm going to do this as slow as possible. And maybe it's because in my 40s, again, I think Antos was saying something about being in your 40s. Was that Nicola? You hit a part of your life where you're like, I know how far I can go and how far I can't. And I also want to introduce, guys, in addition to this conversation, burnout. So I'm a mental health advocate, and I was diagnosed with bipolar 14 years ago. And I do a lot of work in opening the conversation about mental health conditions, burnout being a big one in our industry. I've just come from the Joburg Film Festival conversation about burnout. And I burnt out so many times in my career. And that linked to other mental health conditions was debilitating. You know, when I had my daughter, I had my first, depressive episode, postpartum depression. And somehow my relationship with my daughter is so linked to my well-being that I've realized that I have to be the best version of myself, the healthiest, kindest to myself version, so that I can be a good mom to my daughter, who is now my best friend, my little broke best friend, as I call her. And to open conversations with her about, she did a play last year and she was experiencing burnout. I think mental health conversations are not happening enough, and people just like label it, oh, this person is suffering with their mental health. And then people are so afraid to talk about. And, I've been in forums where I've said I have bipolar and people looked at me like, oh my gosh, are you sure you want to say that? And then you do say that and HR comes for you. I'm not going to mention what company that was. You do tell people I have depression. And then your boss now has a red target on your back for every mistake you make, for every issue that happens. So do we tell our organizations about our mental health struggles? I don't know. I've just been so open about it that I'm like, everyone in my life knows. My mother lives with me. She's a psychiatric nurse. Antos, I agree with you about having a family of people around you to support with your child. Marrying the right person, hopefully having children with the right person who's able to support you, because I've got so many friends whose husbands come home and then they sit there and wait for dinner. And I'm like, so you and your husband both went to work, you picked up the kids from school, you came home, you cooked, and then you talk about being Superwoman. Like, does the guy not have hands or arms or legs? I don't know. So I think there's also all these expectations that are additional layers of expectation when you're Black. Okay, I'm gonna mention that because my mother's just there like your mom, Mimi, stayed in the marriage for us and did all, we had these moms who were martyrs to raise us. They were like, and we're just there like, no, girl, I'm not staying in this marriage. But being Black, there are additional pressure points and additional problems that you have, and so you're Black and you're female. And so if you can imagine that, and I say this to my husband all the time, if I walk into a room and like you said, Mimi, until people hear me speak, I've had people assume I was there to clean the office first. I had people who made all these crazy assumptions. And so being Black and a woman, there's an additional layer of complexity there. And I'm raising a Black woman, so I have to kind of prepare her for all of that as well, But I think for me, what I want to say regarding raising my daughter is having made her my best friend was the best decision I ever made. From the very beginning, I've had open conversations. She can spot, Mom, you're a bit low now. Are you feeling a bit low? Do you need some extra therapy? She's on my mental health journey with me so much because I'm like, the family needs to know, And to my younger self, I'd say, don't give in to the expectations of everybody else about you, because you end up being somebody that you're not. And my first depressive episode where I absolutely had to be hospitalized was because of expectations on my head from mom, my boss, the church, everybody. And one day I just collapsed under the pressure. So now I'm so me, and unfortunately some people don't like it, but the only way I can operate right now as a creative is to bring my authentic self to everywhere I go, because otherwise everything becomes very heavy and uncomfortable. And yeah, yeah.
I don't even have anything else to say after that. That's incredible. Thank you for that, Kopano. You have touched on something that's very interesting, which Sheryl Sandberg said in her book, Lean In, which is that your career as a woman is 100% determined by the partner you choose. And Antos, I know you mentioned this as well, just in terms of how difficult it is to be a woman with a very demanding career in the media industry and finding a partner. Do you guys have any checklists or anything that you would consider looking out for, or people should look out for when considering a partner when you work such a demanding job in this industry?
Well, I can only answer that because I didn't find one. At 62, I raised my daughter, and just to come back to Capona, I mean, through the eyes of my child who also has had, you know, mental health challenges, we have, and not only that, I have a very young team that works with me, and it's quite astounding for me to see and how we've really introduced people being far more open about mental health, because it's a real thing in the youth. It's a very real thing, and it's sometimes hard for someone like myself who has been in the business for such a long time, that didn't have the opportunity to deal with it. And coming right back to you, to what you said, could even for two things, is like, when I started off this conversation, I said, in hindsight, at my age, in living the life that I did, in traveling with artists like Lucky and Ladysmith Black Mambaza and everybody, I got involved at a much younger age when I had my daughter with a musician, which would never have worked out in the first place. But we went there, realized that the relationship wasn't got, but I got the gift of my daughter. And so she became the very key person that I wanted to raise. And I realized at that time, bringing someone else into my life, having this hectic job that needed me, and really I had to travel, that I couldn't even at that stage decide what type of partner I have. And she's saddened sometimes when she says to me, what if you had found the person? And at that, I've never had any regrets, because she's been in my life and she's been the sole person, and I have seen so much through her eyes. And she's made me realize of all of the things that she wouldn't do, because she, in her eyes, I sacrificed. And I don't want to use that word sacrifice, because she was on this journey with me. But to come back to the partner thing, I never had time, because I had her, and then I just realized that I could only have her and have my career. I couldn't make any other choices to go into a relationship, given the fact that I didn't have a great history in picking the right partners. I chose always the wrong partners. So when she was born, I couldn't bring a tumultuous relationship into my life as well.
Oh, sorry about that. Is there anyone else on the floor who would like to respond to that? Thank you, Antoas.
Yeah, I think I could just speak on partners. To be honest, I'm quite blessed to I won't call him perfect, because he might be listening and you can't be, complimenting him in this call. But I'm very blessed to have a partner who it generally does feel like partnership. But then, I mean, to be honest, I married my first boyfriend, which is my husband, because I wasn't planning on, I didn't believe in marriage, really, especially like with watching like my generation. I'm 40 now. Well, I'm turning 40. So like that generation, like what they did in the name of like marriage and things like the sacrifice and stuff. Like my mom, I tell my mom that I don't remember her cooking. I don't remember ever cooking for me, because she was a banker. She would come home like 7 p.m. and my dad would be there waiting, for his dinner. But I mean, that was that generation. But like when I like first got married, and obviously I was going with like the experience then, and then I was trying to do all these things where I'm cooking and and then my husband stopped me one day and asked me like, "Do you think I married you for your cooking skills? Like, why are you doing all of this? Like, I don't need a superwoman. I just need my wife." So that's when I was like, this is important. So like every premiere I have, my husband is with me. He's like my extended, and like you say, like with your broke daughter, I'm like with my unemployed husband in the company. So to be honest, if I didn't have that partnership, I don't know how I would have done it. I'm like listening to answers, and I'm just like, whew, like this is a lot of reality for a lot of people. And I feel like women are not even allowed to speak about it in that way, like, oh, maybe I failed or something. But like, I'm just looking at like a powerful woman right now with like an incredible relationship with her daughter. So I just really wanted to highlight that. But I mean, I can't speak on it, but it's very important. And if it's not working, honestly, there's something we say in Nigeria, you won't die. Like, just go. Like, just leave. Like, if it's not working, like, just leave. But yeah, thank you guys for sharing these. Like, it's a lot. It's therapy session I didn't know I needed at Tuesday. You know what? 12 o'clock. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Mimi, for that share, and Antos as well. Anyone else want to contribute to this before we move on to the last question of the session?
So in terms of partnerships, in terms of my industry and the whole Superwoman thing, I'm married to a woman, and for a long time, that was something that as a woman, we felt we couldn't talk about with men. And we had to, we felt that we had to hide it in our industry because we were dealing with so many men. Every single time we brought up, because we actually work together, and she is my business partner in our record label, and she's my manager. And whenever we went into these big boardrooms with all these men, we would never ever say that we were married, because the comments and the things that were said to us, because we were two women, we felt that we didn't want to really face. But what we've actually done, and what I've done, is just being, not only being brave, I mean, but like actually speaking about it without having any setbacks, and being proud of it, because I think being part of the LGBTQ community, I think, is a massive part of South Africa, of Africa, globally, speaking about it, being honest about it, and making people aware that there are gay women in the music industry working together, owning companies, having a record label, being a performer, being on stage, talking about it, I think is vitally important, because I didn't have that growing up. You know, I didn't have someone to look at that was married. And I think also in picking my partner, she is not only my best friend, but is someone that I can share my open, honest feelings about mental health. You know, if I'm not feeling good about mental health, it's not something that is hushed up in our relationship or even in our business. If you are facing mental health, it's something that we advocate for and something that we speak about. So in terms of that, if you have a partner, be proud of that partner. And if people don't have a partner, also have a lending ear to listen what they're going through if they don't have what you have.
Well, thank you for that, Jamie. Okay, so because we've got 15 minutes left on this call, I think we also just want to leave people with solutions as well, right? In terms of, we've spoken about now, it takes a village, you need to live authentically you. We've touched on aspects of mental health and finding the right partner. If you were to summarize very simply some of the 3 things that you do to maintain a sense of balance in your life on a daily basis, what would those things be? So to balance the professional and the personal, just to keep yourself centered, what would some of those things be? For myself, it's personally wake up in the morning, meditate, be in silence, not touch my phone for like a good hour, just, you know, save time for yourself. Can you guys impart some of your go-to habits that have allowed you to balance the pressures of everything?
I'd like to start by saying that I think we all know the basics. It's exercise and it's vegetables, but I'll tell you that a glass of wine and some balance also goes quite a long way for sanity. But I think what's very important to note, and I think my sister is a psychologist, and she explained to me, and if there's one piece of advice I can give you, it's that there are 2 circles in life. There's a circle of things you can control and a circle of things you cannot control. You cannot control how other people react to something that's happening. And I think that as women, we're efficient and we're fixers and we're trying to work through it and we're communicators. So you're trying to build bridges for people. And it means that we take on a lot of things that we absolutely cannot control. So whenever I have like a tiny little freak out, I say to myself, like, what in the situation can I control? If they like, I'll write down a little list and I'll put it in the 2 buckets. I can control this. I cannot control this. And I absolutely refuse to stress about that which I cannot control. And that took quite a lot of time and effort and stress, because you act like you're not stressing, but then you are. But over time, you just realize you actually just stop stressing. And that's like a major relief to go, oh my God, that is your drama. I cannot deal with this right now. So that's sort of my advice. So yes, circles of control and exercise and wine.
I love the wine, but the circles of control is so interesting, because I personally struggle with, I'm still at a point where I'm just like, okay, everything is high priority, right? So I'm still at a point where I need to delineate things in bins, but that's a great strategy. Thank you, Nicola. Anyone else?
You know, I think I just quickly wrap it up from my side. In 2019, having been through quite a big purchase of the business, that I had moved from a big record company, I started my own label, I started my own business, became a big digital business, and there was a buyout. I decided to walk the Camino. I decided to try and find some spiritual being, because I actually really lost myself along the way. And also my daughter had left home, gone to university, all going to get to empty nest syndrome. And I suddenly went, well, was this all really worth it? It was fun while she was raised. So I walked the Camino, and in that time, I realized I needed to make a big shift. And I think I come back to what Nicola said. And I've always been someone, being very concerned, and being a bit of a pleaser and a mediator and try to be everything. And I really decided then that I needed to start focusing in a little bit on myself, because I needed to have a wonderful next kind of, like, as I walk really right into the sunset of my career. And so I took some real time out, and what I do now is that's exactly what I do. I do time out. I either walk, or I ground myself, or I listen. Actually, have got back to listening to music, because I got to a point where I couldn't even listen to music anymore, because that's all I ever heard. And I put boundaries in place with everybody, including my daughter. At one stage, it's like, I have to have time out, and I created my own sanctuary. And I think that's what we all need to do. We need to just take time. And I put myself in therapy, by the way. That was another thing I did at, I think, the ripe old age of like 59, just because I knew that I had layers that I hadn't dealt with in my life, because I put them all on the side.
Massive advocate for therapy. I love that. Jamie Lee?
Yeah, so I mean, everyone is just giving such beautiful advice, and I think that we all do a little bit of all of these things. So I'm just going to echo on some of them. But something that I started about 6 months ago, is I started swimming. I was trying to find something that would help my mental health and my stress. So I started swimming because I mean, as we do, we scroll on social media and stuff, and I saw this quote, be like water. I think it was Bruce Lee who said it. And the water aspect really, really started to, I started gaining a lot of introspective thoughts, and I started gaining a lot of calm and peace early in the mornings. So I started waking up early. I was in the water at 6 a.m. and that really, really changed my perspective on life. It gave me clear ideas during the swim. I mean, it was tough. It's not that it was easy, and it's not that it's any easier now. But swimming, and then I'm a huge, huge advocate for psychology, or finding a social worker, or just having someone to talk about your emotions. I think that that's so important. I think that people pushing it under the rug, for lack of a better word, I think it's very, very old school. I don't think that it helps anyone. And then, spending time with family, and spending time with not only your personal family, but your chosen family in the world. People that actually advocate for you, people that will tell you when you are in the wrong, and people that will cheerlead for you, going forward. But I do think that those things are definitely helpful, and definitely some wine and good music. I agree, Nicola.
Okay, we don't have much time, but Kopano, I'm going to go to you next, and then we're going to go to some Q&A responses.
I'm so grateful everybody advocates for therapy. In my case, I have to do it. But therapy has really helped me with a lot of my childhood wounds and issues, and really gotten me to the point now where I can be so articulate about my mental health. Exercise, wine, yes. But I have this weird thing that I started doing in my 40s, and I'm 40 now, I'm turning 41 next month, saying no. So I had read Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes book, and I just kept thinking, you must say yes to things if you want your life to get bigger. If you want to be like Shonda, who I'm obsessed with, by the way, you have to say yes. And my new strategy is say no to that social event, and then go back and say, maybe I should, and give reasons why you should. So I say no to a lot more stuff. I know Shonda said we should say yes, but I say no to a lot more stuff. How is my social battery? Do you have capacity? Is this going to help your career along? is it going to feed your soul? I ask myself so many questions and then I go to a yes. And that's something new that I've started doing because I was overwhelmed by saying yes and agreeing and being a pleaser. Those things were drowning me. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies. We're going to go to our Q&A. We've got 2 questions. The first is, and I'll open this to everyone. Lindy asks, do you really have to be tough? Isn't that ironically what makes us to be considered a superwoman? Do we really have to be tough?
I want to say quite specifically, because I work at a very large corporate, I think it's a massive fallacy to imagine that tough is that masculine sort of rude way. I think there's different ways of being tough. And I think it's very similar to when a duckling learns to swim or little eagles learn to fly. It's a muscle that you need to learn to use, and it's a muscle that you learn to flex. Is what does strict look like, yet still respectful? Because I think that regardless of whether you're male or female, you should be strict yet respectful. And you don't always know how that's going to play out. I'm like, rehearse what I'm going to say in my head, and then it comes out, and I walk away, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a douche. Like, that was terrible. And then that sort of, and I had to learn through that process to get to being quite tough in business. And now I'm ruthlessly honest. I communicate exactly what's in my gut, what I believe to be right, and quite shamelessly authentic in that way. But I always try and be very, very respectful around it. But I suppose that might read as more masculine, but I don't believe it to be, because it's something that I specifically practiced because I knew the impact of what that energy could be on people.
Nice. Mimi had your hand up earlier. Did you want to respond to this?
Yeah, I mean, I love what Nicholas said. Like, to be honest, I grew up tough, and it's annoying because people equate that to masculinity. So people would tell me, like, even like in the business room, they would say, oh, Mimi is like a man. She thinks like a man. I'm just a boss. That's what it is. Like, there's just nothing, like, there's just nothing. So it's quite annoying that it's equated to be that. Just have your boundaries. And I've honestly always been truthful. My name literally means truth is good. So I'm never going to hide how I feel about something. And I feel like our industry, we lie to each other too much. But the annoying thing is that when a woman does it, she's tough. She's disrespectful. She's rude. But I'm sorry, that's just me. And that's how other men have been doing it. So if it's not broke, why fix it? That's my thing. Really, yeah. But yeah, that's what I think about it.
Thank you, Mimi. Anyone else like to respond to that? Okay, so we've got one last question, guys, and that's a bit of a lengthy question, so forgive me as I try and abbreviate it. Basically, Yolanda asks, this is a summary here, a lot of the superwoman fallacy is women taking on a lot more because they can. So she's asking, are we also not to blame for this label superwoman because of what we tend to shoulder on to our, take on as our responsibility? She's saying, is there some accountability here, or are we extending too much grace to ourselves?
Can I take that? I just want to say 100%. 100%, I think as women, we also need to take some form of accountability. Like I said earlier on, we need to take a step back and actually reflect on, where does this superwoman fallacy actually stem from? Where does it come from? And how do I then navigate it? Because the minute we are trying to save the world, the minute we're trying to take on so much, we're already acting as superwomen. So like Kopana said, boundaries, very important. When do we actually say no? And I think it's on us as women to also reflect on that. When do we actually say no? When do we actually say, I'm not going to go far and beyond what I am asked to do, or what I supposedly need to be doing at this moment in time. So yes, agreed with, I didn't get the name of the person who asked the question, 100% agree that as women, we also need to take some form of accountability, but also enforce those boundaries as much as we can, because in all honesty, we cannot save everybody. We cannot save the world. We can only, show up so much as ourselves. And for us to really show up fully as ourselves in our femininity, we really need to enforce those boundaries as much as we possibly can. So yeah, here's to accountability.
I completely agree with that. Jamie Lee, and then we'll have to close off.
So I actually had a conversation the other day with my psychologist, and he was saying that with this accountability, and I agree 100%. People gain a lot of perspective with psychologists and in many, many different parts of our lives. But I think that living in the I should is very, very, it's a very dangerous place to be. So what I should do, what we should do about it, what do you think I should do? So I'm trying to actually stop that and rather live in the what I feel. So if I feel completely in my core and if my soul is connecting with it, then I will do that. But I think that a lot of people live in the should, and that's dangerous because you're living in others' expectations and you are not granting your pure expectation. I think that you're living within the expectation of societal norms and the patriarchy. So don't live in the should, live in the I feel.
Beautiful. Wow, guys, I feel I'm so lucky to have had this conversation with you guys. And a lot of people in the comment section are saying this feels like therapy, and I couldn't agree more. Just to summarize for everyone who's on the call, so just some of the key points, if you want to write this down, you should. Firstly, it takes a village. Live authentically you. Find your best friend. Make them your partner if you're lucky enough. Control the things you can control and let go of the things that you cannot. Create your own sanctuary. Don't take on too much and have boundaries. And then self-compassion is what you just mentioned now, Jamie Lee. And then lastly, drink wine. It's a touch point. Thank you so much, everyone on the call. It was amazing having this conversation with you, Nicola, Jamie Lee, Vivian, Mimi, Copano, and Antos. Thank you so much. I'm sure I will see all of you within the industry at industry events. For everyone else who's joining us from home, thank you very much for your time. And don't forget to pre-register for Fame Week. The pre-registrations are open. And there's also the All Collective now, which all of these women I'm sure will be a part of. If you want to be part of the All Collective, please also do look us up online. I think there's information that's being shared now in the chat, so you can sign up for both pre-registry of Fame Week and the All Collective. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and for your incredible, insightful wisdom. We super appreciate it, and we appreciate you. Anything else to say in the 0.2 seconds we have left? No, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. And enjoy your day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.